Hey guys, first of all, thank you for clicking. You're about to watch a new video or another video on YouTube. And before you do, 212-931-5731. What I'm doing in my text community is bonkers, it's instant, it's access, it's exclusive, and now enjoy this YouTube video. To me, if you're selling to 15 to 25-year-olds anything, and you don't have an uncomfortable strategy, uncomfortable is a slang term for all in, creating every day at scale on TikTok, you're missing one of the great kind of moments, and the shit can go away. You got your perspective. I just want to be happy. Don't you want to be happy? What was the biggest aha? You were at Facebook for a decade? Mm-hmm. When you obviously besides seeing that whole thing happen, and obviously I'm assuming, but correct me if I'm wrong, you're like, wait a minute, this platform has a real chance of potentially being the next one. Let me be a smart executive. Obviously, there's some opportunity in being early-ish. What was the aha of the platform that was different than what you've seen before that really kind of gave you the strategic or courage to make that kind of career move?
Well, I'll give you two. Like the aha moment with Facebook was when I met with Zuck, right?
Yes.
And you kind of look at that, and he's just an amazing entrepreneur and founder, right? And the passion that he exuded was, I just remember coming out of the discussion saying that's.
Where were you at the time?
At the time, I was at Yahoo.
Understood.
On Yahoo in the UK, in London. The aha moment with TikTok was when I met Emi, who's the founder and CEO. And it was very, they're very different, the two of them, right? But they're both engineers, they're both super passionate, they're amazing founders and entrepreneurs. And at the end of the day, they both want to make the world a better place, right? And when you see that combined with some of the metrics, and we saw the metrics earlier on the Facebook side as well, the metrics at TikTok are astounding. Like there are no surprises to people in this room. The reason folks are sitting here is because of the numbers, right? The reason I'm sitting here is because of the numbers, and the reason that you talk so passionately about the platforms for the numbers. So,
and just to add my 2 cents, just like I also recognize a lot of people in this room might have a side hustle and are trying to get something started, or have a friend who does, or has some other things that she or he wants to talk about in the world that other platforms can't. I think the thing that TikTok has, and I mentioned it earlier today, LinkedIn ironically is going through the same thing. There's always this time when these platforms are so big that there is so big with attention that there's not enough content to fill it, to ultimately not create a scenario where you can get an incredible amount of awareness and reach when you have no audience. I think the thing that's been most interesting to me over the last 2 months, and I don't think I've seen this in a long, long time, where the nature of TikTok's algorithm and just how much consumption is happening there, and I've been talking about it quite a bit over the last 100 days, I've been bombarded with emails and DMs from people who've desperately been trying to create on YouTube and Instagram for the last 3 years, 8 hours a day, and within 6 days, 19 days, have built such bigger audiences and engagement, not just numbers of followers, on TikTok, and that's reminiscent to the people I saw on Twitter in that first 2006 to 2008 world. You were able to get so many more followers because the nature was everybody followed everybody because it was such a small community, and you were able to get a lot of awareness. And before we do anything else, I think we all chase awareness. The industry has been overpricing potential reach with GRPs and impressions and programmatic, and here's a platform, though I still believe skews to a certain demo that may not match everybody, potentially has its way to match everybody, but has, in essence, free awareness that is very difficult to achieve in other places, and I think that in itself is important.
Yeah, I think you asked a question earlier around kind of brands and how they think about it, and for me, I've been with the company for 6 months, so by no means do I have all the answers, and I would argue we don't have a lot of the answers, and one of the things that I'm really trying to emphasize to teams kind of around the world is that we need help, like we're trying to learn as we go, but it is different, the environment is different, so brands have to think differently about their presence in the platform, and we have some amazing brands who are doing some really cool work, and they're the kind of early adopters. It's the Nikes, the Burberrys, Samsung's doing some amazing things, and I can talk about lots of different executions and how they view it. The one thing in common that everybody has is kind of a willingness to try, first and foremost. Two, they think a little bit differently. So it's not about how do we just take content that I'm running on Insta or Facebook or Snap or ESPN or wherever it might be running, or YouTube, and try and cut it and paste it and stick it onto TikTok. There is a little bit of a different nuance to it. And the greatest success brands are having is when they are engaging with the audience in a very authentic way.
I assume you would believe that to be true for every platform, that the context of the creative is one of the big conversations our industry is not having enough of.
Absolutely, absolutely. On this platform, audiences are so engaged. Like it's, when people, and great examples, might be the MAC Cosmetics execution of Fashion Week, right? They retained 3 influencers. They enabled and empowered those influencers. They brought them to the shows with them. It was a campaign around your beauty, right? So it's all about you and your beauty and transformation of beauty. And they ended up with these 3 influencers creating some amazing content, getting that content distributed up on the platform. Then they had 250,000 other people create content with the hashtag, and they ended up with I think the number was close to 2 billion video views, right? All from a relatively small investment in time and energy.
How are you guys, I actually don't even know this because I'm just in full content and read comments. How are you guys counting video views? Is that 3 seconds? What is your metric?
So for us, video views in that context, organic, is full video views, right? For advertising, we are working with Moat and IES and others around viewability standards.
I understand.
And I will say it's new. So we only launched our Moat and IES integrations maybe 6-8 weeks ago, which might sound crazy for we kind of appear to be this massive company, but I would argue that in many parts of the world we still behave and it's intentional like a startup. We're still building the foundation.
Again, something I don't know, and I have no clue if you guys are publicly saying this. What always gets my attention is when apps shoot to the top of the download list. I'm just fascinated by people in marketing who don't download every one of those apps and plays. So I know it takes a lot to get there and stay there as long as TikTok has been there, but when's the last time TikTok announced how many users are on the platform or how many users are on the platform?
We really don't announce it. We talk to brands about it. We're pretty clear with brands. We don't do it publicly.
Okay. That's why I hedged. I have no idea.
One policy reason or another,
but it's more than
with brands,
one, right?
We're pretty transparent in those numbers. It's not 1 billion, but it's not half of that either.
I understand.
Pretty wide margin, I guess.
How global is it, given it's a Chinese-based company? Where? I always remember. I was just in Brazil, which was a lot of fun for the first time for me, and which is unusual for me. I travel so much, and it was so fun to talk about orchid, because back in 2000, when I was doing this in 07, 08, it was so fascinating to see orchid be the dominant social. This was the toughest battle for Facebook back in the day. I remember. So are there any pockets that TikTok has completely exploded in? I'm always fascinated by the global thing, like Twitter, it's stunningly a non-player in Germany, for example. I'm always fascinated by the global dynamics. Has there been a market where TikTok has completely exploded recently, or anything interesting to share for context?
Yeah, I think it is global, and so we're seeing similar growth all over, the Americas or parts of EMEA, or India's been exceptional.
Yeah, I've noticed
that. That culturally it just resonates, and so there's been a lot of growth in the India market. But other parts of Asia as well. TikTok doesn't exist in China. It's autonomous from the Chinese side of the business. We run it outside of the Chinese market. We run it very locally. So the business in the U.S. is run by teams in the U.S. The business the European business is run by teams in Europe. But it is pretty. It's pretty around the world. It's pretty common. I think the big thing is what's interesting is people always say, what's the difference between you and Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or Snap, whatever it might be? And I would say that some of those platforms are very much they're social networks, right? And that's the world they live in. And we do get bucketed into social, but I would argue we're not a social network, right? It's because at the end of the day, my content isn't necessarily, I don't care with my friends and family. As a matter of fact, I'm not connected to any friends and family on TikTok.
But is any social network playing that game?
What, being connected to friends and family?
Yeah, the evolution of, people are creating Finstas and secondary things, but the reality is all of this has opened, it's really fascinating to watch it all happen, right? Yeah. The notion of a place for friends and family has, for a far majority of consumers, is now their text messaging or their WhatsApp. I mean, TikTok in its execution as a social network has massive similarities to, you know, an Instagram, for example.
I guess I'm probably a little bit skewed on Instagram and Facebook because that's where I grew up, right?
Sure.
And you know, being part of that family, you're deeply involved, and so my experience on those platforms is very much friends and family, and then obviously brands. Whereas my experience on TikTok is very much around the content. Right, so it's a content graph.
What's interesting about that though is when you look at a 14 or 15-year-old, you know, a lot of them, that is their friend network. It, you know, it is being controlled by a parent to allow just their friends and their camp friends or things of that nature. It's almost like where your starting point is becomes your friend network, then it evolves, and then it's interesting to watch people maintain a place for their friends, and it's just the evolution of when you get into a platform.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. It's interesting. You're right. I mean, you know, Gen Z is definitely coming up on TikTok as their platform. Right, yes. And so I was having dinner with my wife and younger kids maybe 2 weeks ago, and there were a couple probably seniors in high school, you know, girls who were over in the corner doing some stuff. I said, "What are they?" I'm like, "They're TikTok, right?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" And sure enough, they were creating their TikToks for their friends, right? Of
course.
And then we were out in Vail having a hike, and there was a family, like, you know, a family with maybe 10, 12, 13-year-old kids, mom, dad, and they were doing the same thing on the trail going up the mountain. They were kind of halfway up the mountain, created a TikTok video, and my wife was kind of blown away by this. And then
your kids,
she was like, why would people do this? And I'm like, well, it's just a different world. She grew up in the Facebook family as well, and then funny enough, you know, 2 weeks ago, Tom Brady joins TikTok, and now all of a sudden she's downloading TikTok, right? She's like, I love TikTok. I was like, what's that?
I'm not engaging anymore. Fucking hate that dude. Yeah, like hate, like not even like polite claps that we were doing now. Like fucking hate you, bro. You can ask the next question. I'm not even excited anymore.
Are you gonna leave the stage now? You're
just super on tilt, man. My football life is the worst.
At least you're not an Eagles fan right now.
I would rip my fucking arms off to be an Eagles fan. You guys won a fucking Super Bowl 2 minutes ago. What the fuck? I haven't even been to one. Yeah, thank you. I will. I'm gonna fucking make sure of it. Exactly. What else?
So I want to talk a little bit about the creator ecosystem.
Okay.
You know, they're all building. They're all developing content on YouTube and on Instagram. Like they're doing it across all the platforms, right? And the one thing they say is when they launch on TikTok, it just goes fast. Like the content, for whatever, it's not restrained by the social graph or whatever you want to call it, right? That when it pops, it just goes really.
There's so much attention on your platform right now. I mean, it's not super complicated. It went really fast on Vine too. It went really fast on Instagram when Instagram didn't have enough creators making for it. This is one big game of supply and demand of content and the attention on the other side. Yeah, and it's gonna go really fast until the attention doesn't match the amount of output. It's just the same old game. This is one game played over and over again. And by the way, it went back to television, but in modern times, this is email marketing. Email open rates for very developed email newsletters in the 1996 to 1999 range had scary numbers like 80% open rates, 90% open rates, because nobody was emailing. You know, and we, you know, how many people here had email in 1997? Just raise your hands. Raise them high, because I want the kids to see this. Remember how we read every fucking email back then? And so there's this attention graph that plays out. And I mean, you intimately know this. This was what I was yelling about in 2009, 10, 11 about Facebook. I'm like, these pages, organic reach is remarkable. And I'm like, and it will go away. And it was not because I knew anything other than it always goes away. TikTok, inevitably, unless it's able to suck out all the collective attention of the world at all times, eventually there's a crescendo, there's a tipping point where there's more content being produced, plus you'll eventually, I think, maybe not, create a product where people can start showing up in the feed or other places. It's a land grab. It's like buying up beachfront property in Malibu. Somebody did that, and eventually it got more expensive. And so, yeah, I mean, I speak to all the creators top down a lot, and I'm spending a ton of time talking to them over the last 150 days, and you're absolutely right. And where I'm really passionate is being a creator now is like everybody's dream at a youth level, and then more importantly for a lot of people here, storytelling and having it seen is very important. And I think it's one thing for a creator that's already won on YouTube or Instagram or somewhere else, when they come over, what's been so fun for me is seeing these people who've, I said it earlier, desperately have tried for the last 3 years, and seeing how quick the results are. And look, you know, flag in the ground, because I try to be historically correct. You know, I have no equity or involvement with TikTok. I give a fuck if it disappears tomorrow.
Hopefully that doesn't happen, Gary.
Fair enough. I respect. I'm sure that 10-year run in Facebook wasn't the worst, Blake. But nonetheless, I think for me it's like, hey, how many more times does this industry, Adweek, need to see this show to understand what the game is? The game is very simple. Things emerge that have uncomfortable amounts of attention in comparison to how much output creatively is there, and those are incredible times to storytell and learn. And people waiting for it to be real or some reporting mechanism to, you know, the rub, and you know this is your guys' world, the rub of waiting for reporting to justify your spend on it is the rub. It's no different than podcast pre-roll right now. I mean, there's no confusion that there's an enormous amount of people listening to podcasts, but watching people not buy ads because the reporting isn't in place yet is why people don't do it. And that's why entrepreneurs and startups always grow, because big companies trade on fake metrics and small companies trade on truth. So,
I'm gonna let that just sit in for a second.
Yeah, I mean, that
was very profound.
It's historically correct. You know, all that TikTok, for me, being the first brand to go heavy into TikTok that is targeting that demo, because I still don't fully know where the demos, but let's just say skews younger for now, is no different than Procter & Gamble being the biggest spender on television in the 50s and 60s, because that was the arbitrage. Or Wish, the shopping app, you probably knew this. Yep. I mean, this is what Facebook executives joke about all the time. There's all these companies and LLCs that nobody's ever heard of spending uncomfortable amounts of money, and Coke and BMW are spending a third of that, and everyone's confused what's going on. To me, if you're selling to 15 to 25-year-olds anything, and you don't have an uncomfortable strategy, uncomfortable is a slang term for all in, creating every day at scale on TikTok, you're missing one of the great kind of moments, and the shit can go away. You know, and it still goes with you. One of the things that I'm always fascinated by is people like, well, Gary, what if it goes away in 3 years? I'm like, you take the brand equity with you. There was a lot of people who built a lot of brand equity on Vine, and when they started creating on Snap or Instagram, the audience, a percentage of it went. I don't know why everybody's so literal. You're so happy to market on Super Bowl or on television or on outdoor, that goes away too. But there's something ideological in the system that has this sad feeling that it might turn into MySpace. You know, my preference is that they all die, because that means the attention's moving and it will always benefit the quickest and the people that are most willing to play that game, which is my most comfortable game. You know, I love having debates with people about the past. The past is always people's vulnerability to the current and definitely to the future.
So, I think that, listen, I'm a big fan of everything you just said, right? You know, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm innovative, like, I love this space. And the reason I joined the company is because at that inflection point where, you know, it's having to learn, it's having to grow up a little bit, it's having to think differently, you know, it's having to create some standards. It does have to have some measurability,
100%.
give people confidence.
100%.
Content's not only being seen, but it's having an impact on awareness, consideration, intent.
And real quick on that, I apologize, Blake, that's all true and all plays here. That has nothing to do with what the consumer is actually doing. Yep. That's the rub. Of course that's gonna happen. That's why you go there. And that will play out over time. But every second you wait for that to happen, the underpriced attention becomes more expensive.
Yeah, I mean, there's an inflection. I mean, up until probably a month ago, I think a lot of that was true. There were good brands that were coming on the platform. There were dozens and dozens and dozens. In the last month, for whatever reason, there's been a real inflection point. Like
well, everybody's back from the summer.
Yeah, everybody's back from the summer. It could be the summer. It could be because I'm just doing such a great job.
Oh, got it. That's where you were going?
No,
I think it's fucking August.
Yeah, that's not where I'm going. But It could be when you started talking a lot about it.
I don't know about that.
But there is a lot more activity now. I mean, and some of the more what I would call mainstream and really powerful brands are getting on the platform and experimenting.
Yeah.
Right. Because it is about experimenting. It's not. The point you made earlier is we could easily launch a platform and say let's take 15-second clips from wherever else and stick them in our feed, right, and build a currency around it and scale the business. We could do that all day long. But when I talk to leading brands, what I keep trying to say is we want it to be different. We want brands to be really this kind of this first-class citizen in the graph, so that when people see the content, they actually engage with it. Right, they engage with it and they become connected to it.
Where your rub is as a platform has been historic, which is getting brands to be contextual creatively is the rub.
It's hard.
It is hard because they are partnered with people often that don't contextualize creative or they don't see it. Real quick, I apologize because I don't know if we're supposed to do this. We're gonna take some questions, right?
Yeah, in a few more minutes.
Is that what you said? Okay. Do you guys know about this, the Slido stuff? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh,
there we go.
No, but if anybody saw today on TikTok, Walmart's got a great activation. It's saving shuffle. It's in the stores. It's kind of engaging. It's but getting Walmart, which is kind of one of the biggest brands, certainly in the U.S. And engaging with that audience is a big deal, right? It's kind of one of those seminal moments you start seeing those kind of brands. And we're seeing that with a variety. HP did amazing. We saw Chipotle's done some great things.
Yeah,
so there's lots of great work coming.
I'm gonna jump in on number 4 because I'm excited about it. I don't know if they're showing it up there, but the question is, how can TikTok ensure they will not have the same destiny as Vine? I touched on this earlier. For them, at least what I've seen historically for the last 10 years, they're gonna have to continue to innovate the product, right? I think if you look at Vine, it got stuck. It just stopped innovating features. Obviously got bought by Twitter, and so it had those dynamics. Platforms that have been able to continue to innovate with trends. I mean, look at Facebook now. They're pushing groups because that's innovating with their, what's the behavior on that platform. I think one more time though, because I think this is the biggest value add I can bring here, we have to start looking at these platforms like shows, not like channels. Again, when it's relevant, you market on it. When Coachella's at its hottest, you activate there. When nobody watches the Super Bowl in 30 years, if that's the case, I have a funny feeling nobody's gonna buy Super Bowl ads. It's not complicated. What I tend to do is spend hundreds of hours consuming content, but more importantly, comments. I spend almost, when I think about the 100 hours plus that I've spent in the last couple months on TikTok, 90% of it has been reading comments of the piece of content. So I go into, For You or where it's Explore or things that are popping or get into a hashtag portal or, see something popping. And of course I'll look at the singular piece of content and that takes 2 seconds on the platform or 6 or what have you. It's actually spending the next 15 minutes reading how people react to it. So, for me it's seeing new acronyms, slang term. It's been super interesting, to your point, over the last 45 days. I always loved, and I loved it on Snap, and I loved it on Vine, when people that aren't 15 start coming onto the platform. Nothing makes me laugh more than seeing something go viral and just reading comments, and you can look at the profile and see it's a 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old, and 94% of the comments are, what the fuck is this? Which is the best, right? You just learn, and so I'm looking,
I was waiting for the first F-bomb.
That didn't happen during Tom Brady? No?
So. Oh, maybe
it did, the number one thing I look for, I think will resonate with this audience, is I'm spending all my time looking for, are there nuances that make me believe that this is going to age up and stick around? But that doesn't stop me from making at scale and extracting awareness at the time. And no different than MTV and then what that evolves into. If you have ambition to be successful at your craft, understanding what's going on here now is going to pay dividends for the rest of your career. I think the reason Snap and Vine and Instagram stories and TikTok came so natural to me is because Social Cam was an app that used the algorithm of, remember that? Do you remember that pop? I don't know how many of you guys remember Social Cam, but for 48 seconds, it popped, and it was the same time that, Photo Booth was popping, and so, the idea of storytelling that way, you could see so many of the nuances of the content today on TikTok that are grounded in the DNA of social cam and Vine and Musical.ly, and that's important because then you start understanding how to storytell. Because being a creator, as a creative director for a brand, I think we all know this, like having the tough conversations as they evolve with the biggest brands in the world to justify why to be on this, it has to go much deeper than, test and learn is always right, and you're seeing that now, but at some point this conversation is gonna evolve into, is this doing anything for my business? And the only way to actually make that happen is to be a relevant storyteller within the context of the four walls that we're in. And that takes strategy, let alone contextual output.
That leads into a good question, which is how do you see ad creative for TikTok evolving in the context of Facebook, Instagram stories?
Look, I think from my perspective, the industry, the reason I fell in love with the feed, right? The idea of those ads was there was less friction in that at the time than there was in a pop-up on a website, in a pre-roll before you saw what you wanted to see. And the native integration of that was far greater than anything I had seen, which is why it came natural to me, because I think friction to the consumer is the devil. And so I was pot committed and it had its run. And now I think we can all recognize that we've been conditioned to expect ads in a feed, which means inevitably it will decline in its relevance with human conditioning. I don't know what TikTok's thinking. I think you've alluded to it twice, and I think it will always be an interesting thing of like, how do we get brands to actually be great at just creative on the platform? But for me, it's always how to make the least friction within the four walls of where you're consuming to actually get the ad across. Integrated in the content is always the best way to do it, especially if you can do it. But if you can't, and you have empathy for the fact that TikTok's building a business and will create ad products, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It's funny, you guys started doing the ad that like is just there for everybody when you open. That has such great scale, and it reminded me of trending topic on Twitter. I don't know if you guys remember the trending topic ad on Twitter when it was still a desktop app and it wasn't like heavily mobile, and it would show you trending and you could have the #1, you could have the ad above the #1 trending ad. And I remember we did some stuff for GE and Green Mountain Coffee that was uncomfortably successful because of just the sheer awareness, just good old fashioned actual consumption and awareness, which is the counter to contextual at scale. So it's interesting to see you guys have already gone there.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know where you guys plan on going, but the least amount of friction will result in the best results.
And the ones that I think so there's called products. I'm not going to bore the audience with this because people can see it, whether it be #challenge, which is basically integrated into like the meme culture, or the top view, which is kind of what Walmart did today, which is kind of a mass scale. I truly believe if people were to pull me aside and say, where do you want the world to go? I really want this to be heavily driven around native feeling ads. I want brands to feel like they belong in the feed. I don't want it to be an interruptive experience. My friend Mark Darcy over at Facebook used to say advertising it's all about averting people away from the content to talk to your brand, right? And I really want brands, because the success they're having when they engage audiences, it's whether it be the Chipotle or whether it be MAC Cosmetics or whether it be what Ralph Lauren did with the US Open with the hashtag winning, like the numbers are staggering. Not just because of the sheer scale, because they're actually engaging these folks and the creative is being created by the audience.
Let me slip this in because I think it will help the audience. I'm genuinely curious as well. One's the best use case for TikTok beyond Gen Z, and then the other, and I think it just went away, which is too bad. It said, you're saying that we should get on TikTok. I remember it because I read it. Yeah. You're saying that we should be on TikTok right now to grab this underpriced attention, but is it relevant for things outside of Gen Z? In its most simple point, are you confident and comfortable at this point telling brands that are marketing to people that are 25 to 45, let's just start with that wide, massive demo, that there's enough user attention on a platform that justifies the investment to put into the platform?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say a year and a half ago, I might not have been able to make that comment. When it was purely Musical.ly, TikTok has fundamentally shifted from a demographic and from a content diversity.
Forget about the content diversity, which I think you guys, to your point, have done an extremely good job to make sure it's not lip syncing. Like, how are you, like, this is actually a very selfish question because I'm getting hit up by my brands. I'm not, on common sense, paying attention with no data behind it. I'm not comfortable saying, hey, you're targeting 30 to 38-year-olds and we should really be spending real time and money on this platform to extract attention, to create consideration. Are you guys sharing with brands numbers?
Yeah. Yeah, we're sharing all the demographic numbers, so they're broad. I mean, it's not like how many 17-year-olds or 23-year-olds.
Yeah, because you're not capturing
18,
that.
24, 24, 35.
You're using third-party data overlay on that because you're not asking for that info, right?
We are using our own data on that because it's part of the registration process.
Yeah, I don't recall at this point because you put in your data.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, with 7 seconds left,
I just have to say, fuck Tom Brady.
Awesome. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, guys. Take care.